How you doing? This is a video lesson for GuitarBite.net. Just to go along with the article, the basics of music theory. I just want to show a few things from that article that relate to playing guitar specifically. The article itself is more of a general thing, just about music theory. It doesn't really relate to any instrument in specific. So what was covered in that article was just what notes are. What a whole note is, what a flat is and what a sharp is, also known as semitones and half steps, what an octave is, and then I just introduced the chromatic scales, the most basic scale, which includes all the notes, all 12 notes, the 7 whole notes and the 5 semitones, and then the major scale. There's a very brief introduction to what the major scale is, which is the most important scale you'll ever learn, because every other scale in music is based around the major scale. So how it all relates to guitar. So if you read the article, it'll tell you what a note is. It's just a name that musicians have given to specific frequencies of sound. So we've got the names A, B, C, D, E, F and G. That's 7 different notes there, and they're called whole notes because they're just given the name by letter. They don't have anything else, they're just letters. So there are 7 of them, and then there's 5 other notes that are known as semitones. And you can think of them as sort of half notes. They're also referred to as half steps, and because they lie halfway in between the whole notes. So halfway in between A and B, you'll have an A sharp. If you're working upwards, if you're working backwards, you can call it a B flat. But they are the exact same note, A sharp and B flat. It doesn't matter what you call it. It just makes more sense if you're working upwards to call it sharp, and if you're working downwards to call it flat. But it doesn't actually matter, they are the exact same. So how all that relates to guitar? Well, I told you this is E standard tuning, E, A, D, G, B and E. That is standard tuning. Hopefully your guitar is tuned that way. If not, you need to buy a tuner or download a tuner and plug a microphone into your PC. And you should have tuned to E, A. If I had D string, I don't have a D string, so it'd be E, A, D, G, B, E. And that's standard tuning. It's E standard tuning because it starts and finishes with E. It's the most common form of tuning that you'll find on a guitar. There are many other different tunings, but if you're just learning how to play guitar, I suggest that you just stick with that one for the moment. It will make things a lot easier in understanding, and then you can move on to different tunings. But most songs have been written on guitar in E standard tuning. Okay. So, if that's an E, the 6th string, in E standard tuning, these frets are used as markers to separate semitones, so separate half notes. Okay, each one of these is a half note higher than the one before it. So E, and you take a half note by fretting the first fret with your finger, E, up a half note. And the thing to remember about notes, again, there's only 12, but there's two differences from the rest of the notes that you'll find is although most pairs of notes like A and B, they have a half note in between, A sharp, there's 2 variations on that, and that's between B and C. There's no such thing as a B sharp, there's no such thing as a C flat, which would be the same note, but there's no such thing, and there's nothing between E and F. So there's nothing in between B and C, nothing in between E and F, but all the other pairs of notes have something in line directly in between them. So if this is E, and remember when I just said there's nothing in between E and F, if we go up a half a note, we're going directly to F. But there is such a thing as an F sharp, and there's such a thing as a G, obviously, and a G sharp exists. A is fine, A sharp, B. Now there's no such thing as a B sharp, so we're going from B directly to C. So C sharp, D, D sharp. And that's our 12th note. That's every note that there is. If we want a 13th note, we can go another half step up, and that brings us back to E. So right after D sharp is E, and we started on E, and we finished on E. And we've just played what is known as an octave. So we start at 1 E, and we go on to the next E up, and that's a full octave up. You can also go backwards, but you can't actually with a guitar, because the lowest note possible is this 6th string, played openly. But on pianos and stuff, they will go a lot lower. Bass guitars will go lower. So that's E. And And what I've just played actually is called a chromatic scale, because I've just played every single note. And chromatic, I'm not sure what language it originates from, but it does mean all notes include all notes. So it's a scale that includes all notes is the chromatic scale. And I've played the E chromatic scale because I started with E, finished with E. E is the home point. It's also referred to as the root note. That's what it's most commonly referred to, so if you remember that, that's the root note. It's your starting point for a scale. It's your finishing point for a scale. It's the key. So whatever the root note is, it's the key of the scale. So this is the key of E with the chromatic scale because I'm playing every note. But it's just not very musical sounding. But it's the most simplest scale. It's just not very musical sounding, chromatic. There's no structure, there's no patterns. You can play anything you want and it's chromatic, but it's not really used in music unless you're really improvising with jazz or various sounds. It's got a haunting quality to it because it's got every note. So you might hear that kind of music in horror films. So what they did, musicians, they left out a few notes from the chromatic scale to make it sound a bit more musical. If you leave out the first note and the third note, I'll just give you the pattern, it'll be easier. Starting with E, we're going to play the E major scale. And just follow this pattern. You take a whole step. Now a whole step is 2 half steps. Remember, every fret is a half step. So take a whole step from E, take another whole step from that note, take a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So that was 2 whole steps, then 1 half step, then 3 whole steps, and then 1 half step to finish. And that last half step will bring you back to the root, which is E. Okay, simple. So that's the major scale. It might sound familiar to you because it's Do, Re, Mi, Fa, So, La, Ti, Do. Okay. And it's a lot more musical sounding, you might think, from the chromatic scale. That's the major scale. So hopefully you know now what notes are, what sharps are, what octaves are, what flats are, what the chromatic scale is, and what the major scale is. I will go into more detail in the next lesson. I'll do a video and I'll do some diagrams for the article on guitarbite.net. Just want to see how much time I've got left here. Okay, I'll just know a couple of things. For the guitar, some useful things to know. The way the guitar works, the way, well, for E standard tuning anyway, this is how this works. If you fret, so if you hold down a fret on the 5th fret for the E string, if you hold that down, play it, and then you play just the next string down, just play it openly, meaning open playing means not to fret anything, like just to play it. You might notice they're the exact same note. The 5th fret on that string is the exact same note as the open string on the next string down. Alright, so this is a useful pattern. It works all the way down. Hold that one down, the 5th fret on the next string down. Should sound the exact same as the next string down, which would be D. So that's a D note. I don't have the D string on this guitar at the moment, but it would sound the exact same as that. And the same would go for the D string if I had it. Hold down the 5th fret, and it will sound exactly the same as the next string beneath it. It's a G string. Now the pattern changes for this string, but only for this string, so all you have to do is remember that. Play the 4th fret on the G string, and that will sound exactly like the string beneath it. And then you can go back to the original pattern, which is hold down the 5th fret on the B string, and that will give you the same note as the last. Okay, so it's 5th, 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 4th, 5th. And that's a useful pattern. It's like doing the exact same thing as starting here, going 5 frets up. Sorry, do that again. Starting there, going 5 frets up. But you could just do this, play directly beneath it. Oh, sorry. So instead of trying to reach all that, you can just go. And that will allow you to play all the way down the guitar. It's a unique patterns that you can do that. So just learn that pattern. It does change. If you tune into a different tuning, it's going to put everything out of whack, and you'll have a different pattern. But for E standard tuning, which is the most common tuning you'll be playing in, just remember that pattern. So that's about it. Frets. The 12th fret is an octave of the open string E, and all down the 12th is the same note but an octave directly up, and that works all the way down the guitar. So A, 12th fret up, G, 12th fret up, you could, if you had strong enough fingers, you could hold it all down. Start of a new octave. Okay, another thing to remember about guitars. Anything else? Simple stuff. No, I guess not. We'll leave it at that. That's the first video lesson. I'll be back to you next time, hopefully with some stuff, more stuff on the major scale, and I'll introduce you to chords. Chords are based on scales, so understand the scales first, and then you can move into chords. Okay, so thanks for listening.